someone. I didn't look at the channel name. Wait, let me look. Telly's Marine Tales. Interesting. Marine biologist weighs in on farmed salmon um, and farmed fish stuff. Let's see. In the thumbnail, it says it's all lies. It's like a red um, font. Now, I don't know if it's clickbait. Uh, it seems clickbaity. Let's see.
And you enjoy the deliciousness of salmon sushi on occasion, but find yourself wondering, is this farmed or wild salmon, and
It's 99% of the time it will be farmed salmon.
which one should I be eating? Which one is
Obviously, wild salmon is healthier.
better for me on a health level, and also what's better for the environment? I've heard some vaguely disturbing things about salmon farming,
Salmon farming it's not as bad as they say, it's worse than what they say.
but what's true and what's not? Should I be eating salmon at all? These were some of the questions that plagued me.
Yeah, you should be eating salmon. It's a good source of nutrition. Wild caught salmon, of course. Farmed salmon is toxic.
Because even though I'm a marine biologist, I didn't really know much about this pink fish that I was eating. So I did a ton of digging through scientific literature, news articles, documentaries, government reports, you name it. And there was a lot of information to get.
You don't need to do a ton of digging. What do they feed the farmed salmon? Crap. Shit. They actually feed it shit. Mixed with grains. Not one wild salmon has eaten grains. Not in the history of salmons. Maybe when they're like swimming through a river, they accidentally like get a grain in their mouths. How would that even happen? Like, and even that grain would not be the cultivated pesticide-ridden shit we have today. That's how wild this is. Not one salmon has ever eaten a piece of a seed in the history of salmons before we started farming them. Not once has it happened. And look at what wild salmon eats. It's it's a hunter. It eats other small animals. It eats a variety of animals. Has an extremely rich diet and extremely rich meat in terms of nutrition. Whereas farmed salmon has shit in its meat. If you feed the animal shit, its meat is gonna be shit.
Through a lot of misinformation, a lot of lies, spanning political, ecological, social, financial, and business realms, you name it. But I ingested all of this information, I debated it internally, and I came to my own personal conclusion as to what salmon I will be eating going into the future. But I wanted to make the most out of all of this effort, and so that is why I am sharing the lessons that I have learned with you today. Now, I'm not going to be
Let's see. Sounds interesting.
able to cover all of the complexity because this is a huge topic. So for this video, I'm mostly going to be focusing on the environmental.
It's not a huge topic. If you eat an animal that eats shit, you kind of eat shit too. Like, maybe if the animal is meant to eat shit, for example, gorillas eat their shit to get the vitamin B6 from it. I think B6. I'm not sure, it might not be that. But that's a natural thing for a gorilla to do. It's not natural for a salmon to eat other farm animals' shits and random grains.
Aspect of wild versus salmon farming because as a marine biologist, this I think is the most interesting and the most important. Also, at the end of the day, I realized that eating farmed salmon is pretty much the same thing as eating any kind of meat that comes from a big farm on land.
It's not true whatsoever. You do understand that at least chickens, for example, they would be eating some seeds. Of course, not the cultivated ones we have today, but and they wouldn't have pesticides or they wouldn't be GMO, but still, like it's somewhat normal. It's not normal, but like it's somewhat reasonable. But for a salmon to eat that, that is insane. That's completely crazy.
It has the same issues like antibiotics and pesticide use and hormones and all that jazz. So if you avoid eating meat products that comes from big farms because of all these issues, you should avoid eating farmed salmon. But if you eat meat that comes from a big farm, you shouldn't really have an issue eating farmed salmon. But if we talk
That's not true whatsoever. Just I just made those points. And salmon is literally GMO. I think it was FDA approved to genetically modify salmon.
talking about impact on the environment, especially when it comes to farm versus wild salmon,
Oh, she's gonna talk about it's better for the environment. Yeah. Crazy.
and what's the best choice if you care about the planet, well, that's when the story starts to get real juicy. But I just want to provide you with some straightforward, helpful information to help you make the best choice next time you see salmon on the grocery shelves.
Just look at the color, man. Can that possibly be natural?
And if, like me, you care about the ocean and you want to help protect it. And I'm going to do this by debunking 3 of the major lies that we are commonly told about salmon in general. The first is that we all need to be eating salmon for
You don't need to be eating salmon. Like most humans in the past, they wouldn't be eating any fish really. Maybe some fish here and there, but it wouldn't be a main part of a diet. It can be, like, it has great health benefits, but you don't have to eat it. Obviously, I'm talking about wild caught salmon. Farmed salmon is toxic.
its health benefits. The second is that farmed salmon is an eco friendly and sustainable alternative to wild caught salmon.
Not true whatsoever, obviously.
And the third is that wild caught salmon is in fact 100% natural and wild salmon. Now, the reason that salmon is a pretty big topic is that it's a ubiquitous type of protein that is consumed in the millions of tons
Again, with the protein, why not mention the micronutrients? Like, protein is protein, man. Get over it. It's just protein. Yes, it's good quality protein, sure, whatever. But there's so much more to meat than just protein. They don't understand. Of course they don't.
every year around the world. It's this delicious buttery fish that we all enjoy, and it's a multi-billion-dollar industry that is only expected to grow in the future because of increasing global demand. You know, the general trend around the world is that people have more disposable income to spend on higher quality foods, and there's this rising awareness of the benefits of leading healthier lifestyles. And salmon is often marketed as one of the healthiest types of proteins that we can eat. And for sure, it's low in saturated fats, it's got vitamins and minerals, and in particular, it has a
Low in saturated fats, isn't that a good thing? Of course, she believes that that is a bad thing because, as we all know, the marine mammals that she studies, orcas for example, they are mammals, they always avoid saturated fat. Before eating a seal, for example, they read the label on the back and look at if it has too much saturated fat. If it has too much saturated fat, the orca won't eat it because saturated fat is a bad thing and it will clog the arteries of the animal. Yes, it's a interesting fun fact.
high concentration of omega 3 fatty acids, which our bodies do need. But the lie here is that we all need to be consuming salmon in particular to get these omega 3.
Who says that you can get omega 3s from just meat, other animal products, eggs? Of course, nowadays, because of the unnatural lives of the animals, the ratio of omega 3s that's going to be a little bit messed up. So you can technically eat fish to compensate, but you don't have to be eating it to get it, obviously. But I imagine because she said bad stuff about saturated fats, I imagine she's going to talk about chia seeds, the omega, quote unquote, omega 3s that's in them.
3 fatty acids. We can, in fact, get omega 3 from a number of other different types of fish and shellfish, including things like mackerel.
Interesting. Interesting. At least, wow, I didn't expect. I thought she was gonna talk about chia seeds.
Sardines, herring, anchovy, oysters, mussels. But also, we can get all of the omega 3 we need from plant based sources. The
There it is. There it is. Right there. Of course.
powerhouses that are chia seeds,
Yes, powerhouses. Seeds. Look at them. They're like if you try to eat them, you would break your teeth, man. What are you talking about? You need to soak them. You need to pressure cook them. Just crazy.
kidney beans, soy, walnuts, and even from seaweed, which I think is going to be a hugely sustainable growing industry into the future.
Yeah, seaweed. That's the best protein, right? The best nutrition comes from seaweed. Literally the easiest thing to grow. It's the healthiest. Definitely not because it's profitable, it's promoted. It's promoted because it's healthy, not because it's dirt cheap. You can literally grow it in some garbage. Literally, you can grow that in garbage. Just water and garbage for the container. I saw some guy, I think it was Cody's lab. He literally grows the algae in garbage. Like literally, he gets like bunch of plastic bottles. He connected them and like made a circuit so it rotates or some shit. Like it's made out of garbage and water. It just produces the this toxic plant or whatever it is.
But not every person on the planet needs to be consuming salmon for its health benefits. Now, please humor me for this next little bit because we as humans often tend to think of fish purely as a food source, as a resource or a commodity, because that's how most of us interact with fish, as a piece of protein that lands up on our plates.
Well, of course, it's an animal. Naturally, you would be hunting it yourself, not buying it from a store. But you can hunt fish yourself. Like, fish is the easiest thing to hunt yourself, unless you live in a landlocked place. But you should have some rivers or lakes, right? That you can.
But I think central to this discussion is to remember that salmon are wild animals, living beings that have formed part of this intricate planet that we live on for millions of years. And what a life they lead. They return to the exact same river in which they were born after spending.
I agree. Nature is metal, man. It's it's pretty crazy and very interesting. Beautiful. Nature is beautiful. I agree. But you have to eat some stuff. Like you need proper nutrition to live your life. Then you can look at beautiful nature.
Years at sea and traveling thousands of kilometers, their grueling journeys up those rivers, often fighting raging rapids to spawn for the next generation, is literally the stuff of legends. And their lives are so deeply entwined with others, providing food to dozens of other species, including things like bears and birds. The life cycle of the salmon is the transformation of the ocean into living things that come ashore and become the biggest trees in the world. So,
Look, I agree. I completely agree. Nature is amazing. The natural order is beautiful. Nature is beautiful, but you can't enjoy it unless you're properly nourished.
far from just being a nutrient dense piece of protein that ends up on our plate, salmon are the backbone of vibrant forest and river communities basically across the entire northern hemisphere. But salmon have also been an important fish to us as humans.
This made me crave some fish. I might go fishing soon. It's like the season. in season. Some good fish are in season now. Maybe I should go hunting. I mean fishing.
for thousands of years, and they have formed central components to certain cultures across the Northern Hemisphere, up to today, where they are the multi billion dollar industry that they are in terms of recreational subsistence and commercial fisheries. And so big money is involved, and where big money is involved, industry is involved. And so enters the era of salmon fish farms. And this is where it starts to get really controversial. Now, I think the initial idea of salmon farming was great. You know, wild populations of salmon simply cannot sustain the current level of global consumption and demand. And so wild salmon in particular were in quite a steep decline because of things like overfishing, but also things linked to habitat destruction because of dams and that whole story. But essentially, salmon farming was seen as a way to continue to supply the global demand while reducing pressure on wild salmon populations. I mean, we farm on land to provide ourselves with enough food, so why not do the same in the sea?
I mean, makes sense looking at it, but you need to remember salmon eats other animals. It's a carnivore, it's not a herbivore. You can't simply give it plants. It's not even plants that you would find in water. It's land plants, it's grains and animal shit. What's it doing in salmon food? Crazy.
And there are a number of truly sustainable and great seafood species that are currently being farmed in aquaculture facilities across the world, but is salmon one of them? Now, the people who work on salmon farms and benefit from them continue to repeat the story that farm salmon is an eco-friendly and sustainable alternative
I mean, is it necessary that I comment on this? Of course they say that because they're making money off it.
to wild caught salmon. But this is definitely a claim we need to interrogate because up to 70% of the salmon consumed across the world comes from farms.
Really? It's only 70%? That's actually surprising to me. I would think if it would be like 95%. Wow.
So it is a big deal. And most of this farm salmon only comes from two countries. Norway consistently produces just over 50% of the world's supply of farm salmon. Chile sits somewhere around 25%, and there are a few other countries that produce small amounts. But essentially, a really small area is responsible for supplying almost the entire global supply of salmon. Okay, so what are the conditions like on these salmon farms? Now, very briefly, for those who don't know, the vast majority of salmon farming is done in the ocean in these big open net pens. So essentially the fish are swimming in the ocean, but they're just confined by these big nets. And these nets need to be placed in protected and sheltered areas because they need to be protected from big waves and storm surges and things like that. And that's why Norwegian fjords make a great
Of course, that's at least somewhat more normal than the what's what's other companies and stuff do. At least it's in the ocean, but they still feed it shit.
place for salmon farms, but also things like coastal bays and inlets are popular places for these salmon net pens. Now, in these sheltered ecosystems, these nets are stocked to the absolute brim. We're talking more than 3 fully grown fish of about 75 centimeters in the space of 1 meter cubed. So that's a lot of fish. And a lot of fish means a lot of fish poop. And all of their poop sinks down to the
Yes, of course, their poop is toxic too, because they eat toxic stuff. Their poop can only be toxic. It can only be that way.
bottom of the ocean floor, where it forms kind of like this toxic sludge, destroying any
Exactly. Toxic sludge. Because that's what they eat. They eat toxic sludge, so they shit out toxic sludge. They become toxic sludge. It's just all toxic sludge. You can't make good stuff out of toxic sludge.
ecosystem underneath these nets. And in some severe cases, all of these nutrients from the fish poop and the extra food and pellets and everything forms algal blooms, and these algal blooms consume all of the oxygen in the water and suffocate all of the wildlife in the area, including the farm salmon themselves.
Yeah, I don't know about that theory. Yeah, I don't know about that. Are you sure it's not the toxins that you're dumping in the water that kills the fish and not the lack of the oxygen?
Imagine
Yeah,
being
I don't know about
suffocated by your own shit. I think one of the
that.
worst examples of this comes from Macquarie Harbour in Tasmania, where we have this big bay filled with salmon fish farms and this teeny tiny little outlet where all of the extra nutrients and poop are supposed to flow out into the sea, which obviously it doesn't. So this ecosystem has experienced severe oxygen depletion, which has driven one species in particular, the Maugean skate, to the brink of extinction. Sounds real sustainable, doesn't it? Now, similarly with land-based agriculture,
Obviously.
cram a whole bunch of animals together in one space, and the thing that is bound to happen is the spread of disease and pests. And for salmon in particular, this manifests as an infestation of lice, copepods that attach themselves to the salmon and feed on their mucus, skin, tissue, muscle. Not very pleasant. And these infestations can get really severe, not only causing problems for the salmon themselves, but these lice will spread to other natural populations of salmon in the area as well as other fish. So it causes negative consequences for the whole ecosystem. So we're starting to see that life in these net pens is not very pleasant. You have these fish that are in really cramped conditions, and this is a species that usually likes to spend most of its life swimming alone. There are these lice that feed on them, so it's not so nice. And one can't blame them for trying to escape at the first opportunity, which is what they do. Oftentimes these net pens will fail, and you'll have thousands of farm salmon escaping into the ecosystem around
Are they even able to survive in the wild?
them. They then start competing with the natural salmon for food resources. There's the potential for them to breed with natural salmon and reduce their genetic fitness. So it's a whole disaster in and of itself. So to conclude this section on salmon farming, you have ecosystem destruction. You have just about the extinction of other natural species. You have negative consequences on the wild salmon populations, not to mention the awful conditions that the farm salmon themselves are in. Does that sound like a sustainable and eco-friendly alternative to you? I don't think so. I'm not convinced. And in fact, this industry has found themselves in such hot water, and there have been so many calls from various environmental agencies around the world to stop these open net pens and to move these operations onto land-based recirculating tank systems. In fact, in British Columbia, there are plans
Yeah, because that's going to be better, right?
in the pipeline to completely transition away from ocean open net pens to these land-based systems. In addition, the Monterey Bay Seafood
They're making it worse. They're making it even worse.
Watch, which is a great resource if you're trying to find sustainable seafood options, pretty much recommends avoiding all of the salmon that comes from these open net pens, but does recommend eating salmon from these land-based recirculating systems,
Oh man, the bullshit we have today.
although there aren't very many of them around. This Seafood Watch also recommends eating US wild caught salmon. So let's talk a little bit about that, because this is a whole other kettle of fish. Excuse the pun. Now, this next section only really focuses on what is happening in Northern America, but it's here that we encounter the trixiest lie of the lot. That if you're eating wild caught salmon, you're eating 100% wild natural salmon. Let's talk salmon hatcheries, shall we? Now, we as humans, for whatever reason, believe we have absolute dominion over this planet and everything that lives on it.
I'm God.
So when salmon numbers started to decline in Northern America because of things like overfishing and damming, instead of thinking to ourselves, heck, we seem to be out of balance with the world around us and we should alter our behavior. Nope. Instead, they came up with this idea of restocking wild rivers with salmon that were hatched and reared in captivity on land. This crazy
Oh boy.
idea was cooked up all the way in the 1870s, and since then the US government has spent billions of dollars on taxpayer money on hatching and rearing salmon juveniles in hundreds of US state owned hatcheries around the country. These captive reared salmon juveniles are then released into the rivers where they're allowed to live their lives, go out to sea, return to the river in an attempt to replace the vast number of wild salmon that were being killed. And as far as I can tell, this is really just a plan to keep fishers and fisheries happy. You know, the US government wants to ensure that there's enough fish in the river so that we can just keep catching as many as we please. And they're spending
So we don't notice the dams and the toxins that they pour in the water. We think that there is enough fish. If there isn't enough fish, people are going to start questioning. Well, where the fuck did it all go? There used to be fish here. I used to catch food here, catch delicious food here. Where did it all go? Then they're gonna turn to, they're eventually gonna find out why. It's gonna be some company dumping toxins. I couldn't talk. Dumping toxins into the river, the ocean, or some dam that's blocking a river. The government wants to keep you distracted. This is always done. Just like how they blamed saturated fats, cholesterol, for heart disease. This is the exact same story.
big bucks on it. One article I saw estimated that the government spends between 250 to 650 US dollars per salmon that returns to the river as an adult to be caught. You know, I do think these hatcheries have good intentions. They are trying to stop the decline
You think that's. Do you really? Good intentions. Also, what does good intentions matter when you're when the consequences of your actions are terrible? I never understand that. Good intention is worthless. If you're not willing to if you're not going to change in the future and you're doing a terrible thing, your intentions have zero relevance.
of wild salmon and trying to bolster their populations with these hatchery reared fish. But unfortunately, the latest evidence shows that not only are they falling short of this goal, but they're actually having the opposite effect and negatively impacting truly wild.
Then why are they still doing it? Then they're not doing it to reimburse the salmon population. They're doing it so the fishermen are happy and they don't question what's actually happening. You just proved that point.
Natural populations of salmon. I mean, you have these fish that are reared in captivity that are then released into the rivers. They are genetically different to the wild salmon and they are less fit. You know, they're sort of brought up in these tanks and so they're not as capable of surviving in the wild. They compete with the wild salmon for food.
They are mutants. They're disgusting mutants.
And then they also breed with the wild salmon, which lowers everybody's genetic fitness. And so I don't know, I kind of feel like if you follow this whole thought experiment through to the end, I don't know how they could have ever got to the conclusion that this would have been
Haha, see? I can see a way.
beneficial for wild salmon. So, what is a person to do? And I know you're not going to like this because I didn't like it when I came to this conclusion, but we all need to reduce our consumption and the demand of salmon on a global scale. After all of this research, I have come to believe that there are no
That too is a pseudo solution. It's to mask the real problem. They will tell you to eat less meat. They will tell you to eat less seafood. They won't address the actual problems causing this stuff. They won't address the toxins that are being dumped in the ocean for no reason whatsoever, really. They will be producing some some useless thing like a hairspray. No one on this planet needs a hairspray. We can live without hairsprays. We can't live without food. We can't live without meat. The nutrition that wild caught fish provides is much more important than whatever cosmetics or whatever chemical thing that we produce. That's it's just more important. Get we should get our priorities straight. These pseudo solutions are merely a distraction for us. Same thing with obesity. They blame the saturated fats, while the cause was sugar, refined sugar. Heart attacks, same thing. Acne, psoriasis, eczema, all the autoimmune diseases. They blamed meaningless stuff, random stuff, while the real problem is in front of us. The diets, the polluted air, not getting enough sunlight.
No truly sustainable or eco-friendly salmon options out there at the moment. And we, as a global community sharing this planet with millions of other species, do really just need to take stock of the impact that we are having on those other species. And we all just need to reduce our consumption of salmon and potentially even eliminate it from our diets. Especially, if you're like me, I live in South Africa, so all of our salmon is imported and it likely comes from some farm somewhere in Norway, which is destroying Norwegian fjords. And this is something that I just can't really be behind anymore. So, as much as it's sad,
Of course, I completely understand and respect that. But of course, she's offering pseudo solutions. As per usual, nothing useful here.
saddens me. I have come to the personal decision to completely eliminate salmon from my diet. I'm not going to consume it any longer because it just doesn't align with the values that I hold dear to me. And you all need to make your own decision. You all need to decide what is more important to you. Is it more important to just simply enjoy the salmon and not think about it, or is it more important to you to realize what is going on behind the scenes and realize that that simple piece of fish is leading to ecosystem destruction and species
Even beyond ethics, it's terrible for you. It's not good for you.
extinction and just all of these crazy negative impacts? And that is something you need to decide for yourself.
Farmed grain fed cows are much better than farmed salmon because of how unnatural it is for the salmon.
So I'm very curious to hear your thoughts on the matter. Please let me know down in the comments below. Obviously, this is a very controversial topic. There's going to be lots of different opinions. But, I have followed the evidence to a conclusion that for me personally resonates and makes sense.
Yeah, just some bullshit pseudo solutions as per usual. Yeah.